Ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to Jolanta Pomiotlo. Now, on occasion, I still flub her last name, but that's not because I haven't been trying for ages and ages. You see, Jolanta is not only a leader in the technical leadership community here in the Chicagoland area, but she's also been an absolutely warm and actively supportive member of the KSP Partnership community, for which we're extremely grateful. Jolanta, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Kimi. It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Now, when I asked you to do this, I had told you that I wanted specifically to talk about your leadership experiences. And I want to tell you, I want not only to learn about how you came to become the kind of leader you are, but also to what you see going forward in the future, because the events industry has had a major shock administered to it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look back before we look forward. Where do you think you've got lessons in leadership that when you look back at it, you think that had to come from experience, that's not something that would have had the same impact if it'd been from a book or a lecture?
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to be surrounded by leaders that model, the qualities that you want to emulate. So, for example, even when I was a student on campus at the university, I had incredible managers and incredible leaders around me that showcased the importance of relationships and the importance of hard work and the importance of recognition. So recognizing others who work hard for you. So I think sometimes the experience of being surrounded by excellent mentors and leaders, you pick up tips and tricks and you try to emulate, like, wow, I really admire that person. They're really kind. They're so trustworthy. They're very grateful and appreciative of all of my hard work. I want to be that kind of a person. I want to be that kind of a leader. So you try to emulate and mimic such qualities. So I would say there's lots of things you could learn from books. There's amazing leadership books around grit and around mentorship and around, good communication skills and written skills. But at the end of it, I feel like, those mentorships and those relationships, being able to see good leadership in action and being able to mimic that leadership and take those lessons from quality leaders around you, I think that has really shaped my leadership style. Because I would always say, I want to be just like that person. Like, they're so kind, they're so trustworthy and helpful. Like, I want to be that for my employees if I'm ever at a position where I have the privilege of being a servant leader as well. So I think just being surrounded by people you admire and you look up to.
So you're also kind of indicating that there is a cumulative and a building effect from having a constant exposure to that kind of enlightened leadership. And
Yeah.
it's not something, I mean, unless you plan to just reread the book every single day, that's not
Right.
something you can get out of a book.
That is true. I mean, it's like experience. They say it's the greatest teacher, right? It's not even just one person that you learn from. I try to learn from everybody I'm surrounded with. And it doesn't even have to be leaders. It could be everyday people are leaders. When you walk into the building, in the loop and the janitor is sweeping floor, you could start a conversation and you learn from other individuals, in any aspect of their life. So it doesn't have to be people at the top of their game who are very influential and powerful. It truly is just the people around you being open to listen to different lessons from everyday people and trying to emulate those good qualities. So I always say surround yourself with positive people who emit that kind of a vibe that you're tuned into, because it truly is, I think relationships are a big component of being a quality leader, and those relationships are at all levels, right? At the janitor level and at the CEO and board level.
I think that's at its heart. That may not be what John Maxwell was talking about when he first started his library on 360-degree leadership. But in many ways, I think apply 360-degree leadership says that in the right circumstance, anybody
Yes,
would be a leader to solve a particular kind of problem. And so I think it's very wise of you to point out that that doesn't limit it to titles or,
hmm,
points on a org chart of some
exactly.
kind.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the best leaders recognize that. They realize that learning and growth happens at all levels, and you just have to be open to it to, at all levels.
There was out where I am, it's a snowbird ranch and we have a
Hmm.
social club.
Hmm.
And of course, there are leaders of the social club and there are people who have become like president and stuff like that. And I've
Hmm.
noticed that it just cracks me up. The people who are holding offices are not always the people who are leaders.
Yes.
And the other day, one of them was expounding on, and Michael and I are fairly young compared to everybody else there, but they were expounding on understanding that the passing of time means the passing of opportunities. And I remember thinking, well, that's of course very wise. But then what cracked me up was he said, yeah, because I was listening to this country western song. So he took a life lesson from a country western song on the radio. And I thought, speaking of being open to getting leadership lessons from anybody
Any,
is, just understanding the relationship of time and opportunity and what that should mean to us as we size up. Which
mhm,
opportunities are you willing to let go right now? Which opportunities are maybe you should think about whether or not you really want to let it go.
mhm,
Um, so as we look at the past, and I have been privileged to watch you in action and see how it's affected your current state, even during the onslaught of the pandemic, during which, let's face it, there were a lot of industries that were hit really, really hard. The speaking industry was bizarre for a while.
mhm.
Um, and yours was, I think, one of the hardest hit because not only was there no clear direction, I guess, but there was also a sense that, done well, you can help people stay connected.
Yeah.
If stumbles happen, it could actually result in something horrific like a super spreader event. So the balance, and you and your leadership team really tread that balance carefully, and I might also add very, very effectively. But that's got to have affected how you make decisions going forward. And I'd like to think that we've always tried to present high quality content to our audiences. And I know as planners, I don't think it's new, but I'm seeing actually articles that saying, oh, okay, a new trend is we want high quality content.
Mhm.
What are they actually talking about? Because I don't think that's new.
Yeah. No, yeah. Great point. I think the pandemic has had a detrimental, impact, a devastating impact on the events industry, hospitality industry, the speaking engagements and such. So a lot of individuals over the past 2 years have not met in person. A lot of the content that has been delivered has been through digital media and digital experiences and engagements. So
Yeah.
now that individuals are ready to come back together in a larger gathering in person after 2+ years for some, they want the wow factor. They want the meeting and the event and the content to be epic, to really be something extraordinary, to fill the void of not being in person and not having that experience. Um, present and tangible over the past 2 years. So I think the trend really is stemming from the fact that it's been a long time since people have gotten together at events and conferences and speaking events, et cetera. So now that they are going to get back together after such an extended period of time, they really want to make that event and that experience special, memorable, and truly wow worthy. So that I think the ask for quality content and creative creative designs that are truly unique and will wow the audience, that is a trend. So we definitely are seeing that in the event space.
Okay, so it's not so much that the content is of a different level of quality. It sounds like it's more along the lines of expanding the understanding of how the presentation of the content is
Yeah.
managed.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And just the expectations are higher just because I think, it's been so long that the expectations around all elements of an event have gone up. The time frame as well. So in the past, we used to have a year where we would plan a whole year before an event happens. That time frame is shrinking, and sometimes we get very last minute requests where we only have a few months to put something epic together. So I think it's just the nature of, I think the pandemic has impacted us in this way, and a lot of organizations as well. And this is just the response of, we're going to get back together. We're excited. We've missed this so much, and we need to make this very special. We need to make sure that we're on point in terms of our content. We have the creative elements in place, and we really wow the audience because it's been so long.
I think one of the things that it strikes me is that from two aspects.
Mhm.
That means that every single event that your team supports has a significantly compressed time frame, which
Mhm.
means their project management skills and the risk management, to my mind in particular, have gotten sharpened. But
Yeah.
also the speakers, on my end of that industry, the speakers, we really need to step up and be able to present you with as seamless an architected, high-tech, high wow factor solution, without making it so complicated that it actually puts more of a burden on your
Mhm.
team, because you're the
Yeah.
ones who are going to be front and center in implementing it. So, ooh,
Big
quite a
pressure.
challenge. No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure.
It's getting done. It's getting done, Kimmy, and people are just excited. Like every a live event that I go to, whether it's a play or a concert, I'm always wowed by the gratitude of the presenter or the artist on stage who was like, "I'm so glad to be in person. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here." Just because after 2 years of not having these concerts or events or et cetera, the gratitude, it's amazing to feel the vibe and the energy of whoever's on stage, right? Being grateful that they're there on stage and in person again.
It's an amazing exchange of energy,
Yeah.
and I confess I've missed it the last
Mhm.
couple of events that I've done that are live in person.
Yeah.
The first one, after all that time, I actually had to stop for a minute and I said, "Well, I'm really sorry about this, but wow, it is so great that you came out. Thank you so
Yeah,
much." And everybody's kind of tearing up, and I thought,
I know.
okay, this can't be happening.
But those emotions are real and should be embraced, and that's what makes being back in person so special, again, after such a long time.
It really does. One of the things though that they're talking about, and I particularly wanted your opinion because I know that you take great care in balancing the timing of opportunities and at the same time the potential risks of implementing too soon or too late.
Mhm.
Um, where do you see augmented reality coming in for, I guess, for organizations that are not necessarily traditionally high tech, like finance or and
Mhm.
other kinds of firms?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the metaverse and virtual reality, augmented reality. I think what we need to realize is the concept behind these immersive technologies is really to try to recreate what we experience in person, right? Instead of having a traditional two-dimension digital experience where we're just Zooming or having a traditional conference, these technologies allow it to be closer to what it would feel like when you're in person, where you're fully immersed in the experience. You're in a three-dimensional world, and it's more than just a flat screen, but you really feel like you're there. And I think that's the big appeal of the metaverse and augmented reality, virtual reality. And a lot of companies, I mean, there's millions, if not billions of dollars currently being invested in these technologies to promote it. I mean, I know if you look at Facebook or Meta now, right? I mean, they're making huge investments in this whole concept of let's interact socially, but instead of on a flat screen device on your mobile device, let's do it in this metaverse where we have, a more immersive experience. And the way I see it is they're just trying to recreate the realities of the three-dimensional world, like as if you were there, but virtually you're there digitally, but it feels like you're there in person. So I think the trend will continue. There's going to be continued investments in augmented reality, virtual reality, whether it's a headset goggles where it's fully immersive, or augmented where it's like you're still in the real world, but you have digital components come to you. Some companies are more mature than others. So like at PRA, we're not making those investments yet. We're just excited to be back in person after the pandemic. And a lot of our technology investments are really still fundamental and core around how do we make the event itself better, through event apps and experiences and gamification and things of that sort. But I do know that other, more trendy Silicon players are really looking at this space as a huge opportunity to make the digital more immersive and more lifelike and more kind of I mean, I think immersive is the right word, is just so it's more engaging. Because I think one of the things that we've learned is the Zoom fatigue. I mean, I'm sure, Kimi, you've heard of that concept, right? Where you're on conference calls all day long, from one meeting to the next, and it's very flat, and you're just fatigued because it's not when you're in person, you could kind of have the side discussions, you could have a cup of coffee, take a little break, and with these Zoom calls, you're just back to back, and it's like straight to business, straight to getting things done. And I think people realized that's not the most ideal virtual experience, so they want it to be a little bit more immersive. Yeah, so that's my take on it. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball to foretell the future, but I think that what I see is, and what I'm reading in the industry is, there's a lot of investments being made in all levels. I think entertainment always seems to be the first one to kind of like dive in. So things like social media or video games, that area always seems to be the first kind of the first mover around these technologies, because it's easy to apply this virtual experience around entertainment, right? Because whether it's a concert or in social interactions, and then business follows. Like I know there's I forget what pharmacy, but there's a retail store that was investing in creating a digital experience. So before they build out a store, they were using the software to basically lay out the store and experience it as if, here's how I'm going to lay it out. And they would walk through the aisles. Okay, what makes sense to have what product at which position at which location? And they were using that to guide their decision making around when they actually build that retail store. So I know businesses already are using it to some degree, but it will continue to evolve and continue to be embraced by the business community. So nobody knows. We'll see how fast it happens, but it's definitely, there's investments being made right now around this technology.
Well, I confess, when I was reading up, I remember thinking, ooh, wouldn't it be cool if I
Yeah.
could do a hologram of, like, there's good Kimi and,
Yeah.
bad Kimi, and enlightened leadership, and oh my God, I don't want to ever work for that person again. And I just envisioned this whole thing, and I thought, are you nuts? You went from 0 to
Oh.
120 in like 5 paragraphs of an article. What?
Oh, Kimmy, do you
So
remember Google Glass? So they had the augmented
yes.
reality, it was goggles. And I think one of the challenges that really held that project back was privacy concerns, in terms of
Good point.
are you able to record on you're wearing just glasses, so it's not like you have a device in front of you kind of recording and showcasing that. So I think there's some privacy type elements around it as well, and that's why that kind of scaled back adoption. I think with virtual reality and the goggles, I remember just a few years ago the price point was a lot higher. It was like in the $600-$700 range for these devices, but now they've really come down to like the $300 range. So I think as it's economically more accessible and it's not this, expensive kind of concept, and there's more software within the platform to offer this, it will become embraced. We'll see how fast it happens, but yeah, privacy is also a concern.
I think that that's and just one of the reasons that you and I have always been able to have such easy conversations is we take a lot of the same perspectives. It's really exciting that this stuff is out there, and okay, let's not get so excited that we forget a little bit of the larger picture, and there are holistic concepts that we have to remember. For example, the privacy thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think to a large extent, people have, in many ways deliberately, lowered their sensitivity to how little privacy they actually have
Mm-hmm.
in such a wildly digital environment. So it'd be kind of interesting. We're talking about things like Google Glasses, which was, in the past, and
Mm-hmm.
augmented reality in meetings, which is, if not the present for most of us, definitely is probably going to feature in our future. But as we go through that, there are many leadership issues and challenges that I kind of worry about. And so one thing that I would like to ask you is, we've been through this amazing level of change and shifting over the past 2.5 years. And, it's not going to stop, but hopefully it'll slow down a little bit. Um, what are some of the leadership challenges that you see, given the rate of change in technology, that you kind of thought we might have figured out before now?
Wow. I think, having diverse viewpoints is a big topic for me, and around leadership is just making sure that at that leadership table, and just in whether it's a technology team or any team, is making sure you have a diverse group of individuals that are contributing their wisdom and their insights, because we are implementing solution for a diverse audience. So you need to have that influence when you're shaping. So for me, I would love to see more women and more, minorities and diverse viewpoints at the leadership table. I think, as you know, Kimmy, we don't have a lot of women on boardrooms, in the boardrooms at the highest of levels, but yet the consumer and the audience, we're 50% female in this country. So you need to have that input when you make decisions as a leader, to understand that your audience and understand your customer base and such like. So for me, I think I love that there's a big movement for equity and inclusion and diversity. And I think it's like about time. We're not there yet, but at least it's getting I mean, for some reason, this pandemic has really highlighted the importance of being more inclusive and diverse. And I think that is a blessing. And I hope we continue, that momentum continues, because for me, it's been decades since, women had the right to vote and women had equal opportunities. I just think that there needs to be more inclusion and diversity at those leadership circles at the highest level of management.
One of my students had, and this is a point that you brought up, one of my students
Mhm.
asked me, how long do you think it's going to be before we can get people to understand
Right.
that there is diversity and there
Yes.
is inclusion, and they're
Yes.
not actually, they're joined at the hip in terms of what makes them effective.
Yeah.
But if you have diversity and you don't have inclusion, it's not going to
Right.
work. And if you
Yep.
have inclusion, but you don't have diversity, it's not going to work. He
Yeah.
said, I don't think they understand that there are two concepts that are interconnected.
Yes.
People think of it as diversity and inclusion, like it's one word or something. And I thought,
So true.
wow,
Yeah.
I mean, what can we as individuals do you think, about that issue? Because it's such a big one. It can
Yeah.
sometimes feel a little bit too big for any one person.
Yeah. I think, obviously starting a discussion about it, being an ally, being a person who welcomes, diversity. And when I hire, that's something I look for. And it's something that I think every person within an organization, there should be programs implemented at every organization to make sure this is a focus, that we have the right metrics around, are we keeping track of things that matter? And I think at most organizations, you don't even have key metrics around those things yet. I think now that because of, the recent movement and such, it's starting to the data gathering is starting to get collected. But I think if it's important, which it is, it needs to be properly managed. It needs to be properly sponsored by the executive level. And it properly needs to be, we need to capture the metrics around, all of that. So I just think, we all play a part. We talk about it, we promote it. I always try to be very involved in my, campuses at the universities. I know there's not a lot of women in tech. I think that's such a travesty. And I always try to be that role model. We talked about earlier on the call about emulating those qualities you want to see, in yourself and other leaders, being surrounded by other people that look like you, that talk like you, in whatever field that you choose, whether it's you want to be a doctor or an astronaut or a technologist. It's important to have those role models so you can say, like, yeah, that person did it, I can do it too. So it's all of those things is it's really important to make sure to make that a priority and be an active component in promoting diversity and inclusion and kind of walk the, talk the talk is one thing, but actually walk the walk, being willing to donate your time, being willing to, help and mentor others and kind of progress.
I think that one of the things that the speed of change that is expected versus the speed of change as it actually happens
Yeah.
is that, to a large extent, we have forgotten the power of incremental improvement.
Improvements. Yeah.
And so people are looking at the world saying, we were talking about this last month. Why
Right.
aren't you a fully integrated, fully inclusive and
Yeah.
diverse board of directors? Well, I'm sorry, but the organization's been in place for 35
Yeah.
years. It was
Right.
last month. And, I think it behooves us to absolutely keep an eye.
Yes.
And at the same time, a little positive reinforcement for some of the changes that we have seen is not amiss.
Right.
And then, so I get a little worried about that. And then I look around and I see how much has happened since when I
Yeah.
entered technology. I thought, wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is massively cool. So you do stand as an example, and it's wonderful because you're not just an example of a woman in technology and of a mother who has integrated her life, and probably with a little bit more frustration some days than others, just like everybody else. But you've also been an example that I like to hold up to people of how leadership is a combination of what you build and who you are in terms of your professional identity. And one of the things that I love most is how welcoming and warm and kind you are. And I believe that that means that you may have set yourself a pretty high bar.
Let go of perfection, especially when you start balancing motherhood and professional career. Let go of perfection and just embrace progress. Don't let, perfection get in the way of progress, because sometimes, especially as a working parent, you have to make choices, right? And it's
Oh, yeah.
sometimes you're going to feel like I'm not doing this perfectly, but I'm also not doing this perfectly, because you're trying to juggle it all. And I know they say, oh, you can have it all. I don't think that's true. I don't think you can have it all. I think you have choices at
Mhm.
certain points in your life. You can have it all based on your choices that you devote, at that time. But I think, sometimes leaders and successful professional women, we set a very high bar and we want things to be perfect. We want to be on top of things. We're very structured and process oriented, and we want things to move. And I think just letting go of perfection and just being embracing progress. Like, it's okay to incrementally continue to strive and improve. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I think that would be, for me, especially when I first became a parent, that was really hard for me with my first son. Is, I wanted a clean house. I wanted the dishes to be perfect. But yet I have this baby that needs attention. And you end up, if you want to have that standard, you're going to end up exhausted. And I think, looking back on it, the advice I would give myself is just let that go. Like, it's okay. Like, it's okay if the dishes are not done for a couple days. Like, just don't stress yourself out. Relax. Everything's fine. And I think that would be the advice I would give myself and my former self, is just let go of perfect, embrace the chaos, and just be present in the moment, and don't stress yourself out about, kind of juggling it all and being perfect in those regards.
I could have used that advice last week, I think.
Really? Do you have perfectionist tendencies, Kimi?
Oh, let's see. I'm on the 16th draft of a blog that I'm
Yeah.
writing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think a little bit. I think that it's also a tendency that many of us can accidentally fall into,
Mhm.
in part, and this might be generational, it might be industry based, I'm not sure. Uh, in part because if you're aware that you're one of the first,
Mm.
or perhaps even the first, there's a level of responsibility that seems to, just kind of descend on your shoulders, and you think, oh my God, I need to make this as good as possible because
Yeah.
otherwise I'll be the first and possibly the last. That would not be good.
Oh, that's an interesting point, Kimi.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
We put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And I think, we want things to be done well, right? We want, like, if I work, it's my parents have always said, if you're going to do something, do it well. What's the point of doing it if you're not going to do it well? And I think just having that mentality ingrained is, you want it to be successful. You want that project to be completed on time. You want to be on budget. You want things to go well, right? And as part of that, sometimes don't let perfection get in the way of progress, because progress is good. And sometimes progress is incremental, and that's a good thing. And eventually you'll get to that well state. So,
I know I always tell people, managing scope and managing expectations
yes,
isn't about making somebody settle.
right.
It's about giving them the absolute best you can right now,
Hmm.
and then setting us up for another future success, and doing that. Of
Yeah.
course, I don't know about you, but on occasion I have found that I am the last person to take my own advice. So there you go.
Oh,
Yolanta, I am so glad, because I know that schedules being what they were, and different obligations, I have been wanting to have you as an interview guest for ages and ages. So thank you so much for taking the time to do
oh.
it.
Thank you, Kimmy. It was such a pleasure. It's always nice seeing you and speaking with you.
Well, I am looking forward to hearing more as we go to our various meetings together about what you see happening with the meeting industry, and also what you see happening with how others in the organizations that you touch are developing their own leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.